So, hi everybody, welcome to the first in a two-part series of trainings on Power BI. Today's training is about how to use Power BI reports, how to be the end user. We're going to talk about just basic navigation, how to press all the little buttons, tweak everything. And then we're going to talk about sort of a baby step between viewing reports and making reports. We're going to talk about how to export the data into Excel and use pivot tables if the report you're looking at doesn't meet your needs. The second part, which we're not covering today, is going to be focused on the makers of reports. Just so that you know, in case you would like to come and you're not already signed up, what we would be covering in part two. Can everybody mute, please? What we would be covering in part two is we'll be talking about how to import data from Excel into Power BI, how to do data transformations, how to create reports, and then how to publish and share those reports. But that's not today. Today is just part one. Although there is this PDF, which was linked in the calendar appointment, I am not going to be flashing it on a screen a whole lot. For the most part, I'm going to be demonstrating here in Power BI. And I encourage you guys to work alongside at home because at least for me, muscle memory really helps in making a thing stick. If you are a person like me who only has one screen to work on, you can split your screen in two by holding down the Windows key. For me, that's just to the right of the control in the bottom left of my keyboard. It looks like a flag. If you hold the Windows key and hit left arrow, it'll shunt what you're looking at over to the left side of your screen, and then you can pick whatever you want to be the right side of your screen. We're waiting in the lobby. So on the left side of your screen, you could have your browser open. On the right side, you could have this presentation.
Yes, if anyone else pops in, I'll admit them.
Thank you, Joe. I appreciate that. So with that, let's just dive right in. Everybody, please open a URL. I'm sorry, open a browser and go to the URL and type in powerbi.com. And on the right, it'll say sign in. And you are not, unless you're at the PIHP, not you, Joe, but everybody at a CMH, you've got a special username and password for usage with Power BI, because you have to have special licenses in order to make everything function. So you're going to be signing in with that. And hopefully everybody's already done this, so this shouldn't be an issue. No, do it. Oh. I'm already signed in, so once you sign in, you're looking at a screen like this. Give it just another second to make sure everybody's able to sign in. So the basic navigation is simply this. Almost everything you want when you get to the home screen is over in the bottom left. It's called workspaces. It's kind of like folders that hold stuff, or websites or something like that. When you hit workspaces, you'll see all the workspaces to which you have access. Everybody's going to see something different here. But everybody should at least have a workspace called All Affiliates and PIHP, and one that says Training. We'll be using both of these workspaces today. So once you've got your workspaces listed, click on All Affiliates and PIHP. You should see two reports when you get to this screen: Encounter Analysis and FUH Estimate. Because I have different privileges set for this workspace, I'm also seeing the underlying data sets. You guys are not going to see the data sets. So reports are blue, data sets are orange. When you look in here, you should only see 2 blue squares: encounter analysis and FUH estimate. So to get into the report, today we're going to be looking at encounter analysis. You click on the report name. And that opens it up. So this is the report we're going to use to illustrate how to do all the different tweaks in Power BI. Before I talk about those tweaks, though, I want to just talk about the content of the report so you know what you're looking at. This is the Power BI version of Cricut Report 1031. The purpose of that report is to look at all the services rendered under the PIHP umbrella and what was their eventual fate. Were they encountered? And if not, why not? What happened? We have a graph here by month showing you each bar is showing you all the services rendered, and each chunk in that bar is showing you its eventual fate. White means encountered, everything else means some other thing happened. We also have the data set broken up on the left by CPT code. We see for each CPT code the number of service lines in the data set, the number of distinct cases, people that are represented by those services, and the percent of those services that are encountered. You go all the way down to the bottom, you see there were like 1,800,000 services in this data set, and that represents what is this, 18,154 distinct people. And overall, in all of those services, 97.25% of them became encounters. When you look at an Excel analysis, you on the bottom left see tabs that are showing you different sheets. In Power BI, it's on the left. So this is the first page, the summary. On the second page, we have a table, which shows you that same basic information, number of services, number of distinct cases, percent encountered, but it shows you by fiscal year, by county, by provider, and by CPT code. So before we dive into how to use Power BI, are there any questions just about the content of this report? Is it all clear? Okay. So the reason why Power BI is such a great tool is because you have so many more options to interact with the data and make it show you what you need it to show you. The first thing I want to talk about that you can do with Power BI reports is filter. There's 3 different ways you can filter in a Power BI report. The first and most obvious is with this filters pane on the right. Whoever sets up this analysis decides what variables go in here, and once they set it up, now you have the power to use them. So when this was set up, it was made so that the user can filter by encounter analysis, which is the eventual fate. There's check boxes here. They can filter by fiscal year, Medicaid county in the 271, provider name, year, month, etc. So for example, I could, let's say I'm only interested in seeing the services that had an unbillable CPT code. I click that and now everything's been filtered. I can see the distribution by month, and I can see what CPT codes are involved and how many distinct service lines, how many people, so on. I could do more than one at a time. I could just say, I only want to see fiscal year 21 unbillable CPT codes, and so on. Whenever you make a change with a filter like this, up here, this little curly Q arrow lights up. This is your home key. This is what you click if you want to get your report back to its original published state. So if I click this, reset, now all the filters and things I had go away. So that's one way you can filter with the filters pane. The second way is also very obvious, and that is using sliders, which is this thing up here, or slicers, which are these checkboxes down here. So let's say I don't want to look at all of, I don't know, October. Let's say I just want to look at October 1. Oops. You could either type it in here, or you can use these slider keys. Now I'm just seeing that one day's worth of services, and I'm seeing the eventual fate of those things. Or let's say I want not just services rendered on October 1st, but I want just the dabs. That's where the slicers come in. If you want to click more than one checkbox at a time, you hold down the control key. So if I hold down the control, I could say, let's say I want dabs and Healthy Michigan. So that's the second way that you can filter the data, with slicers and sliders. I'm going to hit reset to get back to the original published state. The third way is not at all obvious, but it's very useful. And it's something called a cross filter. In these visualizations, if I click anywhere on it, it will filter the other visualizations accordingly. For example, let's say I'm really concerned about this H0039, why only 52% of them are encountered. If I click anywhere in this row, any of these numbers, that one, now the graph on the right is filtered just for H0039. And I can immediately see that the issue is insufficient minutes. That's why so few of them are being encountered. Although this cross filtering is really handy, there's one thing that's annoying about it, and that is the reset button doesn't seem to respond to cross filters. So to turn it off, you just click it again, sort of an on-off thing, on, off. It works in the opposite direction as well. I could click, let's just unbillable CPT. If I click that in the legend, now I'm just looking at the CPT codes that were unbillable and the number of services, number of people, percent encountered. And again, it's an on-off. Or you could get real specific. Let's say you just wanted to see in June, the services where it says unknown problem. If I can aim real good and hit that red bar, now I'm just seeing the table filtered for that. So that's how you filter. Filter pane, checkboxes, sliders, or just cross filters. Suppose there's a certain way that you need to click this up often, and it just is time consuming and irritating to have to click it each time. Like, let's say you're in Lenawee. So you're only wanting to see Lenawee data. You only want to see mental health services, and you only want the dabs, really. And you have to look at this often. Then what you're going to want to do is make a bookmark for how you've got it clicked up. So the way you do that is you click it how you want to see it. And then in the upper right, there's a bookmark icon. Click the down arrow. Give it a name. Sorry, click add a personal bookmark. Give it a meaningful name. So Lenawee, mental health, dab. If for some reason you want this to be the home screen when you first open it up, you could say make default view. Otherwise, you just say save. And you can make more than one. Let's say you want to see sub abuse as a second one. Oh, add a sub dab. So now when you come in, you can be quick looking at the mental health. You can look at the sub abuse. And of course, you can always use the reset key to get back to the original published state. Another thing that's not super obvious, but it's a nice feature, is that each visualization, and a visualization, by the way, is pretty much anything that's on this canvas. This graph is a visualization, this table is, this set of checkboxes is a visualization, and so on. Each of them, when you hover over, you see options appear. So I'm going to talk about some of these options and what they do. The first one, so I'm going to hover over this graph. And by the way, I'm on page 6 of the handout if you're following along. The first one is if I hit this little funnel, this will tell me what filters are applied at the moment, because sometimes it's hard to remember everything you've got clicked up. And it's saying there aren't any right now. Okay. Copy makes a copy of the picture that you're looking at, I believe as a JPEG, so that you could paste it into an email or a Word document or whatever. Focus mode, this right here, makes it so that the entire screen is taken up by that visualization. It makes it a lot easier to see the fine details. To get back, you hit back to report. Export data. This, if you hit summarize data and export, will give you in Excel the data that would be required to make that exact same graph, but in Excel. So maybe you've got a different way you want to format it out. So it's the summarized data that are behind that graph. Similarly, if you say show as table, it's just showing you all that same information, but on the screen instead. Back to report. You also can change the sort order. I don't know why you would want to do it, but let's say here I have sort by. Right now it's sorted by year, month. Let's say for some reason I wanted it sorted by count of services. Could do that. Not extremely helpful, but you do see that we had the most services rendered in March of 21, at least in this picture. You can sort ascending or descending. So I'm going to make it go back now to year, month, and oh, wrong order, so sort ascending. And then the last thing that I want to talk about is a really cool feature. It's pretty new, and it's this little thing, like the icon is a column graph with a little edit symbol. If you click this, then you can change almost everything about this visualization. Like, let's say right now it's doing count of services. That's how tall the bar is. Instead of count of services, no, not remove. I want distinct cases. So now instead of number of services, I'm saying how many people had an encounter, how many people had an unbillable service, and so on. And you can make a bookmark for this in the exact same way. So if you want to flip back and forth between this visual and the original, you could do that easily. You can change the legend, in other words, what's making up these bars, this. You can change the axis, and from year, month, you could change it to something else. You could even change, if you don't like it as a stacked bar chart, you could make it a, let's say, a line chart. Ton of stuff you can do here, even if you're not a quote report maker. So I'm going to click reset back to original published state. In some of the visualizations, you have additional options to drill in, and I'm going to illustrate that with this table on the second page. So this one happens to have drill options for rows and columns. Let me show you the rows first, because that's where it is. If you hit this forked down arrow, it will show you the next level in addition to the level you've got now. So hitting the forked arrow, and because I was on rows, it's showing me the next level, which is provider, in addition to the level I was at now, which is county. In order to drill back up again, you hit the up arrow. The non-forked arrow, the non-forked double arrow down, it shows you the next level and no upper level. So I don't get to see county, I just see provider in this case. Hit the up arrow to get back. Let me show you what that looks like real quick for the fiscal year. If I say drill on columns instead, if I do the forked arrow down, now I see year, month in addition to fiscal year. If I just do the double arrow down non-forked, I see year, month instead of fiscal year. And then the last thing I want to show you is this single down arrow. What this does is the next thing you touch, you'll drill into it and everything else will be hidden. So, for example, let's say I'm in Monroe. So I hit the single down arrow and I hit the county Monroe. Now I'm just looking at Monroe, everything else is hidden. Now I'm looking through the providers and I see, oh, what's going on here? Jail services. If I just hit jail services, I'm looking at that and everything else is hidden. And let's say I'm really concerned with 2021. I don't really want to see 2020. I just hit that and everything else is hidden. So you can easily dig into just the part that you need to look at without having to do a ton of clickage in an Excel file. And go back up or just reset to get back to the original published state. Are there any questions so far on any of this stuff? Okay. The next thing I want to talk about is how to share this information with somebody else if they don't have Power BI, or maybe they don't have access to the internet. Like, let's say you want to bring it to a meeting as a paper copy. If you go to the top under export, you have some choices. If you've been granted access, you can analyze in Excel. We're not going to talk about that right now, but we will next. You could export this to a PDF, and you could also export it to a PowerPoint. I recommend the PowerPoint because you'll have a little bit of editing power once you do. So let's say I did export to PDF. If I hit export right now, it would take a couple minutes and it would give me a PowerPoint. Did I say PDF? Because I meant PowerPoint. It would take a couple minutes. It would render it to a PowerPoint. And let me just, oops, quick show. I didn't want to waste time downloading it. Let me show you what that would look like. If you export it to a PowerPoint, it gives you a pretty decent report without having to do much editing at all. And like I said, this is a little better than a PDF because you can do things like if I click on this visual and I go to picture format, I can just like crop it, for example, whatever you want to do. Excuse me. That's what you might want to do if, let's say you had a report you wanted to bring to a committee like CPT or Ready or something like that. That's an option. So there's a lot you can do in Power BI as far as tweaking and clicking. I think those are probably the most useful things. Before I move on to how to use Power BI data sets and get it into Excel, are there any questions or comments about anything so far?
This is Laura in Washington. I just want to say, wow, very
Yeah, it's
cool.
cool. Oh, thanks,
Wow.
Laura.
Yeah.
This, I hope, is our way forward. I mean, Cricut reports have their place, but when it's a Cricut report with 10 different screens to show you all the possible ways you might want to slice and dice it, I think this is better.
Do you have a vision of how this is going to be used? Like, are you going to be kind of moving us all to using this, or don't know yet?
Just no, I do have a vision. We're moving slow because it's a very new product and I'm very new to it and it changes so often. Probably once a month there's a major update and then you're like, what the heck is this? But My broad vision of this is that the kinds of reports in Cricut, like I said, that have a zillion different sheets, because I'm trying to guess what views you'd want to have of it, like the BH TEDS analysis or encounter analysis is like this one. I would put those in a Power BI report, and that's how you guys would access it. But the kind of reports that are just so simple, like a list of things, that's really not best done in Power BI. That would stay in Cricut reports.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Any other questions or comments? Okay. Remember a second ago I said you can export and analyze in Excel. I'm going to talk about that now. But I'm not going to talk about it in terms of this data set, because you guys don't have access to the Excel for this data set. If you did, you would end up seeing other affiliates' data, and we can't have that. So for the purpose of illustration, there is a different analysis I want to show you. If you guys go to Workspaces and go to Training, you all should see both the data set and the report. And neither of these have any PHI in it, so it's safe. I don't think that this is a groundbreaking analysis at all. It's literally just something I threw in here because it doesn't have PHI, but just for illustration, I made a quick little report called Fee Schedule. It pulls in all the fee schedules, and it has the unit type and how many distinct CPT codes are there in the fee schedules, and it shows you the max and min rate by CPT code. Not earth-shattering. I only have it here so that you can see how, if this particular analysis didn't meet your needs, you could export the Excel data and make what you need with a pivot table. So to get to the data set, there are two places you could go. You could see it right there, the data set right there in the training workspace, but that's not always going to work. A better place to go for your data set needs is on the left pane of the screen. There's a link that says data sets. When you click there, you're going to see all the data sets to which you've been granted access. Different people will see different things. The one we're looking at here right now is fee schedule. If you could click the ellipsis next to fee schedule and say analyze in Excel, this will do the exact same thing as a second ago I showed you when we were saying export and it said export to Excel. This is that exact same process, but it's just a different way of getting there. Open it up, and hopefully this is not the first time you're doing this. This was the thing everybody needed to do ahead of time. And what you should see once you click through all the enable buttons is a blank pivot table ready to roll. If you have used pivot tables before, this should look super familiar to you. You've got the blank canvas on the left, and you've got the fields to pull in on the right. The one major difference is when you're making a pivot table in Excel, it usually just looks like this. There's not this second part up here. It just looks like this, and you're able to just grab things and throw it into the values. Guess what? It won't let you. You can't just grab any old thing out of the field list and throw it into the values. This is a little bit annoying, but in Power BI, you have to have known ahead of time what calculations you were going to want to do, like max rate, min rate, number of CPT codes. You have to have known ahead of time you were going to want to do those tallies, and you had to set those things aside as measures. Whoever set up this analysis has to set those things up as measures. And only measures can be pulled into the values box. So in this analysis, I knew ahead of time that I was going to want to be looking at number of distinct CPT codes, min rate, and max rate. So those were put aside as measures. And now they show up here. And these are the only things that I can pull into the values box. So if you haven't used pivot tables, this is really not the place to learn it, but I'm just going to really brush the surface of the kind of thing that can be done by doing a very simple analysis. Take max rate, drag it down to the values box. Now I see the max rate for CPT code in our fee schedule is really big number, $31,000. I could also pull down min rate right next to it. The min rate is 0. This is not hugely helpful as is. It becomes more helpful as you start dragging things down into the rows or columns. Like if I take CPT code down to the rows, I could just start searching through this and go, where the heck was that 31,000? But a better way is by row labels. If I click this down arrow and I go to more sort options, I can sort descending by max rate. This is, by the way, in page 11 of the handout, if you're following along. Hit OK. All right, it's H2000. I could take affiliate, drag it down. All right, it was H2000 and it was Washtenaw. And then the neatest thing about pivot tables, something whose functionality I am not able to replicate exactly in Power BI all by itself, is if you double click any of these summarizations, like if I double click that 31,000, a whole new sheet opens up showing you all the data that went into that max. So I can just quickly run through here. The rate is on the right. I can sort largest to smallest, and there it is. And someone might want to look into that. So this is how, with this pivot table, this is how, if the Power BI analysis is not exactly what you need, even if you're not a quote report maker, you still have some flexibility as to getting what you want out of the data set. The last thing I want to talk about, I ought to pay lip service to it, is this. So we've gotten this far, analyzing data with Excel pivot tables, creating Power BI reports in powerbi.com. Technically, you can create reports in powerbi.com as opposed to the desktop app. You can do it right there on the web, but I have found that it is full of bugs, and rather than wasting everybody's time talking about the hacks that you need to do to make it work, I'm just going to say I'm not covering it and I'm pretending it doesn't exist. Because there's a much easier option that doesn't involve hacks, and that is using the Power BI desktop to make reports. And that's actually what the whole next, like part 2 of this training is going to be. How to use Power BI desktop to import data, make reports, and share them. More information. This is the very last page of the handout. On anything Power BI can be found at this link. Everything that I know, I'm super new to this. Everything that I know, I learned by taking a couple days and going through these trainings. They are really good. They walk you through step by step how to do everything. There's a virtual computer lab where they actually tell you, click here, watch how it does that, click there, watch how it does the other. Anything I know because I took this. So if you're serious about Power BI report making, really, I don't want to say encourage because that's not strong enough. You should take a couple days and click here and go through this training. It's absolutely free and really, really good. So that is part 1. Does anybody have any questions or comments before we stop this recording? Okay, well, if I can figure out how to stop the recording, stop recording. Thanks everybody for attending this. I'm going to turn off the recording, and then if people have other questions they want to ask that are not recorded, we can do that.